The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the exclusive Grandview shopping center. Maya Johnson walked through the pristine corridors, her simple black dress and comfortable flats making soft sounds against the polished stone. She carried a small leather purse and moved with quiet confidence, though she seemed out of place among the designer boutiques and luxury stores. Maya had always preferred simple things. Even though her husband Marcus owned one of the largest tech companies in the country, she chose to dress modestly and live without showing off their wealth. Most people had no idea who she was, and that's exactly how she liked it. Today, she was shopping for her sister's birthday gift. Something special, but not too flashy. As she approached the jewelry section of Hartwell's department store, Maya noticed the way some of the staff looked at her. Their eyes moved from her simple outfit to her plain wedding ring, and she could see them making quick judgments. She was used to this kind of treatment, but it still stung sometimes. "Can I help you?" asked a young sales associate, her tone polite but clearly dismissive. The woman's name tag read Jennifer, and she wore an expensive-looking suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "I'm looking for a necklace," Maya said softly. "Something elegant but not too fancy. It's for my sister's birthday." Jennifer glanced at Maya's simple appearance again. "Well, we have some nice pieces in our affordable collection over here," she said, pointing to a small display case in the corner. "These start at around $200, Maya smiled patiently. She had dealt with this kind of assumption many times before. "Actually, I was thinking of something a bit nicer. Could I see that sapphire necklace in the main display?" The sapphire piece Maya pointed to was clearly one of the store's most expensive items. It sat in the center of the main jewelry case, surrounded by other precious stones and metals. The price tag, though turned away, was clearly in the thousands. Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly. "That piece is quite expensive," she said carefully. "It's $15,000. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer something from our more budget-friendly selection?" "I'd still like to see it, please," Maya replied, her voice remaining calm and polite despite the obvious doubt in the sales associate's manner. Reluctantly, Jennifer unlocked the case and carefully lifted out the necklace. The sapphires caught the light beautifully, and Maya could see why it was displayed so prominently. It was exactly the kind of piece her sister would love, elegant, timeless, and sophisticated. As Maya examined the necklace, she became aware of someone standing very close behind her. She turned to see a tall woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, wearing what was clearly a designer outfit from head to toe. The woman's jewelry sparkled expensively, and her handbag alone probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. This was Victoria Ashworth, though Maya didn't know her name. Victoria was the wife of a successful real estate developer, and she considered herself the queen of this particular shopping center. She was used to getting the best service, the best tables at restaurants, and the best of everything life had to offer. She didn't like waiting, especially not behind someone who clearly didn't belong in the same social circle. "Excuse me," Victoria said loudly, her voice cutting through the quiet atmosphere of the jewelry section. "I've been waiting to speak with someone about a custom piece. Surely you can help me first?" Jennifer looked between the two women, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm currently helping this customer," she said carefully, "but I can call someone else to assist you." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she looked at Maya more closely. She took in the simple black dress, the plain shoes, and the modest purse. Her expression grew more disdainful by the second. "Really?" Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "And what exactly is she buying?" "Let me guess, she's just looking, isn't she? Wasting everyone's time while real customers wait." Maya felt her cheeks grow warm, but she kept her voice steady. "Actually, I'm considering purchasing this necklace for my sister." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound that made several other shoppers turn to look. "That necklace costs $15,000, she said loudly. "Do you have any idea what that means?" "That's more money than you probably make in 6 months. The jewelry section had grown quiet. Other customers and staff members were now openly watching the confrontation. Maya felt all their eyes on her, and she could see the mixture of curiosity and embarrassment on their faces. "I understand the price," Maya said quietly, trying to diffuse the situation. "I'm still interested in the piece." But Victoria was just getting started. She had had a frustrating morning. Her usual parking spot had been taken. Her favorite coffee shop had been out of her preferred pastry, and now she was being asked to wait behind someone who clearly didn't belong in a store like this. "This is ridiculous," Victoria announced to the growing crowd. "Look at her. Does she look like someone who can afford a $15,000 necklace? She's probably here to waste time, or maybe she's planning something else entirely." The implication in her words was clear, and Maya felt a chill run through her. This woman was suggesting that she might be a thief, simply based on her appearance. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Maya began, but Victoria cut her off. "No misunderstanding at all," Victoria snapped. "I know exactly what I'm looking at. You people always think you can come into places like this and pretend to be something you're not. Well, I'm not fooled, and I won't stand here and watch you waste everyone's time." The words "you people" hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maya felt the familiar sting of discrimination, something she had hoped she wouldn't encounter in a place like this. But prejudice, she knew, could exist anywhere, even in the most expensive stores. Jennifer looked mortified. She clearly wanted to help Maya, but was also intimidated by Victoria's aggressive manner and expensive appearance. Other staff members had begun to gather, unsure of how to handle the situation. Maya took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of everyone's attention, could see the smartphones that had begun to appear as people started recording what was clearly becoming a dramatic scene. She had a choice to make. She could reveal who she was, could call her husband, or pull out the black credit card that would immediately change everyone's attitude toward her. Or she could try to handle this with dignity and grace, the way she had always tried to handle such situations. "I understand you're frustrated," Maya said calmly, "but there's no need for this kind of behavior. I'm simply a customer looking to make a purchase." Victoria's face reddened with anger. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she considered beneath her social station. The morning's frustrations, combined with what she saw as disrespect from someone who should know her place, pushed her over the edge. What happened next would change both of their lives forever. Victoria's hand moved faster than anyone could react. The sharp crack of her palm against Maya's cheek echoed through the jewelry section like a gunshot. The force of the slap was so sudden and vicious that Maya stumbled backward, her hand instinctively moving to her stinging face. The entire store seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the background music seemed to fade away as everyone processed what had just happened. Maya stood there, her dark skin showing a red mark where Victoria's hand had struck, her eyes wide with shock and pain. "How dare you talk back to me?" Victoria screamed, her voice shrill and filled with rage. "You need to learn your place. This is what happens when people like you try to act above your station." The words poured out of Victoria like poison. She was beyond reason now, fueled by years of privilege and entitlement that had never been truly challenged. In her mind, she was teaching someone a lesson about respect and social order. Maya's cheek burned with pain, but the emotional hurt cut even deeper. She had faced discrimination before, but never anything this public, this violent, this humiliating. Around her, she could see dozens of people with their phones out, recording every second of her humiliation. "Ma'am, please," Jennifer, the sales associate, said, her voice shaking. "You can't do that. I need to call security," but Victoria wasn't finished. She pointed an accusing finger at Maya, her diamond rings catching the light as her hand shook with anger. "Don't you dare call security on me," she shouted at Jennifer. "I'm a valued customer here. I spend more money in one shopping trip than this woman makes in a year. She's the one who doesn't belong here." Maya touched her cheek gently, feeling the heat radiating from where she'd been struck. She could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. The physical pain was bad enough, but the shame of being attacked in front of so many strangers was almost unbearable. "You need to leave," Victoria continued, her voice getting louder with each word. "Go back to wherever you came from and stop pretending to be something you're not. These stores aren't for people like you." A small crowd had gathered now, drawn by the commotion. Some people looked horrified at what they had witnessed, while others seemed uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. A few were still recording, their phones capturing every moment of Maya's humiliation. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had learned long ago that showing weakness in situations like this often made things worse. Instead, she stood up straighter and looked Victoria directly in the eyes. "What you just did was assault," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the pain. "You had no right to put your hands on me." This only made Victoria angrier. She stepped closer to Maya, invading her personal space in a way that made several onlookers shift nervously. "Are you threatening me now?" Victoria hissed. "I knew it. You're probably going to try to sue me or something, aren't you? That's what your kind always does. Cause trouble and then try to profit from it. The racist implications in her words made several people in the crowd gasp. Even some of Victoria's social circle, who might have initially sympathized with her frustration, began to look uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. Maya felt a deep sadness wash over her. This woman knew nothing about her life, her struggles, or her achievements. All Victoria saw was the color of her skin and her simple clothes, and that was enough for her to justify this treatment. "I don't want to cause any trouble," Maya said softly. "I just wanted to buy a gift for my sister." But her calm response only seemed to infuriate Victoria more. She was used to people backing down when she raised her voice, used to getting her way through intimidation and social pressure. Maya's quiet dignity in the face of her attack made her feel like she wasn't winning this confrontation. "Stop lying," Victoria shrieked. "Nobody believes you can afford anything in here. Look at you. Look at how you're dressed. Do you think we're all stupid?" Store security had finally arrived. Two uniformed officers who looked uncertain about how to handle the situation. The older guard, a man named Robert who had worked at the shopping center for 15 years, approached the two women carefully. "Ladies, we've had reports of a disturbance," he said diplomatically. "Is there a problem here?" Victoria immediately turned her attention to the security guards, her demeanor changing completely. Her voice became sweet and reasonable, the voice of someone used to being believed and supported by authority figures. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, her hand fluttering to her chest dramatically. "This woman has been causing problems, making scenes, and wasting everyone's time. She's clearly not a serious customer, and she became very aggressive when I pointed that out." Maya stared at Victoria in disbelief. The woman who had just slapped her was now presenting herself as the victim. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and Maya could see that the security guards were inclined to believe the well-dressed, articulate woman over her. "That's not what happened," Maya said firmly. "She struck me. Everyone here saw it." Robert looked around at the crowd of onlookers. Some nodded in agreement with Maya, while others looked away uncomfortably. The presence of so many recording phones made him nervous. He knew that whatever happened next would likely end up on social media within hours. "Ma'am," he said to Victoria, "did you put your hands on this lady?" Victoria's eyes flashed with indignation. "I may have gestured," she said dismissively, "but only because she was being threatening and disrespectful. I felt unsafe. I was simply defending myself." The lie was so bold, so complete, that Maya almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked around at the faces in the crowd, hoping to see support, hoping that someone would speak up for the truth. A few people nodded encouragingly at her, but most seemed reluctant to get involved. "Several people recorded what happened," Maya said, gesturing to the phones that were still pointed at them. "The truth is right there." But Victoria had one more card to play. She reached into her expensive handbag and pulled out a business card, handing it to the security guard with a flourish. "My husband is Richard Ashworth," she said importantly. "Ashworth Development? We're major investors in this shopping center. I think you'll find that my word carries some weight here." The name clearly meant something to the security guard. His expression changed subtly, becoming more deferential toward Victoria and more suspicious of Maya. It was a small shift, but Maya caught it immediately. She realized that this woman wasn't just racist and violent, she was also powerful. Or at least she had access to power through her husband's business connections. This wasn't just about one person's prejudice. It was about a system that protected people like Victoria and failed people like Maya. Maya felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. She had dealt with situations like this before, where her word was questioned, where her truth was dismissed, where her very presence was seen as somehow threatening or inappropriate. Usually she found ways to navigate around these obstacles, to prove herself through patience and quiet persistence. But this time was different. This time there had been violence. This time there were witnesses and video evidence. And this time Maya decided she wasn't going to walk away quietly. She pulled out her own phone and speed-dialed a number she rarely used during shopping trips. As the phone rang, she looked Victoria directly in the eyes. "You're right," Maya said calmly. "Connections do matter, and truth always comes out in the end." The phone call Maya made would change everything, though nobody watching understood that yet. On the other end of the line, Marcus Johnson was sitting in his corner office on the 40th floor of Johnson Tech Tower, reviewing quarterly reports that showed his company had just become one of the most valuable tech firms in the world. "Maya?" Marcus answered immediately, recognizing his wife's number. "Is everything okay? You sound upset." Maya's voice was quiet but steady. "I'm at Grandview Shopping Center. There's been an incident. Can you come here, please?" Marcus had been married to Maya for 12 years. He knew her well enough to understand that if she was calling him during a shopping trip, something serious had happened. Maya never asked for help lightly, and she certainly never asked him to leave work unless it was truly important. "I'm on my way," he said, already standing and grabbing his jacket. "Are you hurt?" "I'll explain when you get here," Maya replied. "I'm in the jewelry section of Hartwell's department store." As Maya hung up, Victoria watched with growing unease. Something about Maya's calm confidence as she made that phone call didn't fit with Victoria's assumption about who she was dealing with. For the first time since the confrontation began, Victoria felt a small flicker of doubt. "Who was that?" Victoria demanded, trying to maintain her authoritative tone. "Your lawyer?" "Well, I have lawyers too, and better ones than you could ever afford." Maya didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the security guard who was still holding Victoria's business card. "I'd like to file a report about the assault," Maya said clearly. "I also want to speak to the store manager about what just happened here." Robert, the security guard, looked uncomfortable. He was caught between his instinct to take the complaint seriously and his awareness that Victoria Ashworth represented important business interests for the shopping center. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "maybe we can resolve this without involving management. Sometimes these misunderstandings can be worked out between the parties involved." But Maya shook her head firmly. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. I was physically assaulted by this woman in front of dozens of witnesses. That's a crime, and I want it reported properly." The crowd around them had grown larger. Word was spreading through the shopping center that something dramatic was happening in the jewelry section. Some people were just curious about the commotion, while others had heard rumors about a racist attack and had come to see for themselves. Among the onlookers was Dr. Patricia Williams, a prominent civil rights lawyer who happened to be shopping with her daughter. When she heard what was happening, she made her way through the crowd to get a better view. What she saw made her blood boil. "Excuse me," Dr. Williams said, stepping forward and addressing Maya directly. "I'm an attorney and I witnessed what happened here. That woman assaulted you and I'm willing to serve as a witness." Victoria's face went pale. Having a lawyer volunteer as a witness was not part of her plan. She had expected Maya to back down, to accept the implicit message that she didn't belong in a place like this and leave quietly. "This is ridiculous," Victoria said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Everyone is blowing this out of proportion." It was barely a tap. Dr. Williams pulled out her own business card and handed it to Maya. "That tap left a visible mark on your face," she said firmly. "In legal terms, that's assault and battery. The fact that it was clearly motivated by racial prejudice makes it a hate crime." The words hate crime rippled through the crowd like electricity. Suddenly, the people recording with their phones were paying even closer attention. This wasn't just a shopping center argument anymore. This was potentially a major news story. Victoria began to panic. She had acted in a moment of rage, letting her prejudices and sense of entitlement override her judgment. Now she was facing the possibility of serious legal consequences, not to mention the social and professional fallout that would come if this story went public. "Wait," Victoria said, her voice becoming desperate. "Let's not get carried away here. Maybe I reacted too strongly, but she was being very disrespectful. Can't we just forget about this whole thing?" But Maya had made her decision. Years of quietly accepting discrimination, of taking the high road while others treated her as less than equal, had led to this moment. She wasn't going to let this attack go unanswered. "No," Maya said simply. "We can't just forget about it." Just then, a commotion near the store entrance caught everyone's attention. People were stepping aside, creating a path through the crowd. The store manager, Mr. Harrison, was hurrying toward them, looking nervous and confused about what was causing such a disturbance in his usually peaceful establishment. Behind him walked a man in an expensive but understated suit, moving with the confident stride of someone used to command. He was tall, with graying temples and kind eyes that were currently filled with concern. Several people in the crowd seemed to recognize him, pointing and whispering to each other. This was Marcus Johnson, though most people knew him from business magazines and news programs rather than personal encounters. As the founder and CEO of Johnson Tech, He was one of the most influential business leaders in the country. His company's innovations in artificial intelligence and cloud computing had revolutionized multiple industries. Marcus's eyes quickly scanned the crowd before settling on Maya. He could see the red mark on her cheek immediately, and his expression darkened with anger. But when he reached her, his voice was gentle. "Are you okay?" he asked, touching her face softly where she had been struck. "I'm fine," Maya said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Marcus, this is Victoria Ashworth. She slapped me because she didn't think I belonged in this store." Marcus turned to look at Victoria, and she felt her heart sink into her stomach. She recognized him now. His face had been on the cover of Forbes magazine just last month. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had just assaulted the wife of one of the most powerful men in the country. "Mrs. Ashworth," Marcus said, his voice perfectly controlled but carrying an undertone of steel. "I believe you owe my wife an apology." Victoria's mind raced desperately. Everything she thought she knew about this situation had just been turned upside down. The woman she had dismissed as beneath her notice was married to someone who could destroy her husband's business with a phone call. I didn't know," Victoria stammered, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "If I had realized who she was," Marcus repeated, his voice getting slightly louder. "So you think it's acceptable to assault someone as long as they're not connected to wealth or power? You think my wife's worth as a human being is determined by her relationship to me?" The crowd had grown silent, hanging on every word. Many people were still recording, and they could sense that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Mr. Harrison, the store manager, finally reached them, looking flustered and concerned. He had been briefed on the situation by his staff, but seeing Marcus Johnson in his store put everything in a different perspective. "Mr. Johnson," he said nervously, "I'm so sorry about this incident. We're investigating what happened and we'll make sure it's handled appropriately." Marcus nodded but kept his attention focused on Victoria. "My wife called me because she was assaulted in your store by this woman. She was attacked simply for existing in a space where she had every right to be. What are you going to do about it?" Victoria realized that her entire world was about to collapse. The story of what she had done was already spreading through the crowd and onto social media. By tonight, everyone would know that Victoria Ashworth had slapped a black woman in public because she didn't think the woman could afford to shop in an upscale store. And now everyone would also know that the woman was married to one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. But the worst part wasn't the embarrassment or even the potential legal consequences. The worst part was seeing the look in Maya's eyes. A look that said Maya had expected exactly this kind of treatment, that she was used to being judged and found wanting by people who didn't know anything about her. Victoria had revealed something ugly, not just about herself, but about a society that still judged people by the color of their skin and the clothes they wore, and now that ugliness was going to be exposed for everyone to see. The silence in the jewelry section was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps. Richard Ashworth, Victoria's husband, had received an urgent call from his assistant about a situation at the shopping center. As a major investor in the Grandview complex, he was often notified about incidents that might affect business or require his attention. But nothing could have prepared him for what he walked into. Richard was a successful man who had built his real estate empire through careful networking and maintaining good relationships with powerful people. When he saw Marcus Johnson standing next to a black woman with a visible handprint on her face, and his wife Victoria looking terrified nearby, he immediately understood that his family was facing a catastrophe. "Victoria, what have you done?" Richard's voice was barely above a whisper, but everyone in the immediate area could hear the horror in his tone. Victoria turned to her husband with desperate eyes. "Richard, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding and things got out of hand." But Richard was already moving toward Marcus and Maya, his business instincts telling him that he needed to try to control this situation before it destroyed everything he had worked for. "Mr. Johnson," Richard said, extending his hand in a gesture that was both respectful and pleading. "I'm Richard Ashworth. I am so deeply sorry for whatever my wife has done. Please, let me make this right." Marcus looked at the offered hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "Your wife physically assaulted my wife because she didn't think Maya belonged in this store. She made racist comments in front of dozens of witnesses. I'm not sure how you make that right, Mr. Ashworth." The crowd around them had grown even larger, and now included several news reporters who had been alerted by the social media posts that were already going viral. The story was spreading fast. Racist woman slaps black woman in luxury store doesn't know she's married to billionaire CEO. Dr. Williams, the civil rights attorney, stepped forward again. Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that I saw everything. Your wife handled herself with incredible dignity in the face of a vicious, unprovoked attack. I'll be happy to testify to that in any legal proceedings. Victoria felt the walls closing in around her. The realization of what she had done and who she had done it to was sinking in fully now. But beyond the fear of consequences, she was beginning to understand the deeper horror of her actions. Looking at Maya now, seeing the quiet strength in her posture and the pain in her eyes, Victoria began to comprehend that she had attacked an innocent person for no reason other than her own prejudices and assumptions. The woman standing before her had done nothing wrong except exist in a space where Victoria had decided she didn't belong. Mrs. Johnson, Victoria said, her voice shaking, I don't know what to say. What I did was wrong. It was inexcusable. Maya looked at Victoria for a long moment. The apology, while clearly motivated by fear rather than genuine remorse, was still an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But Maya had heard apologies like this before. Apologies that came only after consequences became clear. You're right, Maya said quietly. What you did was inexcusable. But more than that, it revealed something about how you see people like me. You looked at me and decided I was less than human, less deserving of respect and dignity. That kind of thinking doesn't just hurt me. It hurts everyone. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Maya's response was being recorded by dozens of phones, and her words would soon be shared across social media platforms around the world. Marcus put his arm around Maya's shoulders, both comforting her and showing his support. My wife is one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever known, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the quiet space. She volunteers at homeless shelters. She mentors young women. She donates more money to charity in a year than most people make in their lifetime. But none of that should matter. She deserved to be treated with respect simply because she's a human being. Mr. Harrison, the store manager, was frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation. He knew that the story was already spreading beyond his control. But he also knew that how his store responded would be scrutinized by the media and the public. Mrs. Johnson, he said nervously, please know that this behavior does not represent the values of our store. We welcome all customers regardless of their background or appearance. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. Maya nodded, but her expression remained serious. Do you really? She asked. Because your sales associate seemed very quick to assume I couldn't afford anything in your main display case. And your security guard seemed more inclined to believe Mrs. Ashworth's version of events than the truth that was recorded by multiple witnesses. The criticism hit home. Mr. Harrison realized that this incident was exposing problems in his store that went beyond just one customer's bad behavior. The implicit biases in how his staff treated different customers, the assumptions they made based on appearance, the way they deferred to wealth and status, all of it was now under a spotlight. Jennifer, the sales associate who had first helped Maya, stepped forward hesitantly. Mrs. Johnson, I want to apologize too. I made assumptions about you that I shouldn't have made. I treated you differently because of how you were dressed, and that was wrong. Maya looked at the young woman with something approaching kindness. Thank you for saying that. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. Meanwhile, Victoria was experiencing something she had never felt before, genuine shame about her own behavior. Watching Maya handle this situation with such grace and dignity was showing Victoria just how small and petty her own actions had been. I was raised better than this, Victoria said suddenly, her voice breaking. My parents taught me to treat everyone with respect. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became this person. Richard looked at his wife with a mixture of disappointment and sadness. He was realizing that this incident wasn't just about one bad moment. It was revealing aspects of Victoria's character that he had either not seen or chosen to ignore. Maybe, Maya said gently, this is an opportunity for you to figure out how to become someone better. The suggestion surprised everyone, including Marcus. Even after being attacked and humiliated, Maya was offering her attacker a path toward redemption rather than simply seeking punishment. Dr. Williams shook her head in admiration. "Mrs. Johnson, your grace in this situation is remarkable. But I hope you understand that grace doesn't mean you have to forego justice. What happened here was a crime, and it should be treated as such." Maya nodded. "You're right. There have to be consequences. Not just for Mrs. Ashworth, but for the systems and attitudes that made this possible." Marcus squeezed Maya's shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he asked softly. Maya looked around at the crowd of faces, at the phone still recording, at the reporters taking notes. She thought about all the times she had quietly accepted discrimination. All the moments when she had chosen to avoid confrontation rather than stand up for herself. "I want to press charges," Maya said clearly. "I want this to go through the legal system properly. But I also want something else." She turned to address the crowd directly, her voice carrying to everyone in the jewelry section. "I want this to be a conversation," Maya continued, "not just about what one person did in one moment, but about how we treat each other every day. About the assumptions we make, the biases we carry, the ways we judge people before we know anything about them." The crowd murmured in agreement. Maya's words were being recorded and would soon be shared widely. But more than that, they were touching something in the hearts of the people who heard them. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Maya said. "But it starts with moments like this, when we're forced to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society." Victoria was crying now, understanding fully for the first time the weight of what she had done and what it represented. Richard put his arm around her, not in comfort, but in a gesture that said they would face the consequences together. The incident at Grandview Shopping Center was about to become national news, but it was also about to become something more. A catalyst for conversations about race, class, dignity, and the kind of society people wanted to live in. And at the center of it all was Maya Johnson, who had been attacked for the crime of existing while black in an upscale store, but who was choosing to respond with a combination of justice and grace that would inspire millions of people around the world. 3 days after the incident, the video footage had been viewed over 50 million times across various social media platforms. The hashtag #OutsyourJusticeForMaya was trending worldwide, and news outlets from CNN to BBC were covering the story. But the real impact was being felt in homes, offices, and communities everywhere as people wrestled with uncomfortable questions about their own biases and behaviors. Victoria Ashworth sat in her lawyer's office, staring at the stack of legal documents that would soon change her life forever. The criminal charges were just the beginning. Maya Johnson had also filed a civil lawsuit, and there were calls for hate crime charges to be added. But perhaps worse than the legal consequences was the complete destruction of her social standing and her husband's business reputation. "The DA is offering a plea deal," her attorney, James Morrison, explained. "Guilty plea to assault and battery, 6 months community service, mandatory anger management and sensitivity training, plus a public apology. Given the high-profile nature of this case, it's actually quite generous." Victoria nodded numbly. She had spent the last 3 days watching her life fall apart in real time. Friends had stopped taking her calls. Social events she had planned were suddenly canceled. Her husband's business partners were distancing themselves from the Ashworth name. The country club where she had been a member for 15 years had quietly asked her to resign. "What about the civil suit?" she asked. "That's separate," Morrison replied. "Mrs. Johnson is asking for damages, but her attorney indicated they might be willing to negotiate if you show genuine remorse and commit to meaningful change." Meanwhile, across town, Maya Johnson was dealing with her own unexpected challenges. The viral video had made her a reluctant celebrity, and she was struggling with the sudden attention. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests from major news programs. Publishers wanted her to write a book about the experience. Speaking agencies were offering 6-figure fees for her to share her story at conferences and events. But Maya had never wanted fame. She preferred her quiet life of charitable work and supporting her husband's business from behind the scenes. The constant scrutiny and media attention felt overwhelming, even though she understood the importance of the conversation that had started. "You don't have to do any of these interviews if you don't want to," Marcus said, finding her sitting in their home office surrounded by messages from reporters and producers. "We can handle this however you're comfortable with." Maya looked up at her husband, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know this is affecting your business too," she said. "All the attention on our family. The media constantly asking about your response to what happened." Marcus sat down beside her and took her hand. "My company's stock has actually gone up since the story broke," he said with a slight smile. "Apparently, investors like CEOs whose wives handle crisis situations with grace and dignity. But that's not what matters. What matters is how you're doing." Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking about the hundreds of messages she had received from people around the world. Women of color sharing their own stories of discrimination. Parents thanking her for showing their children how to respond to injustice with strength and integrity. Business leaders promising to examine their own practices and policies. "I keep thinking about what Victoria said," Maya admitted, "about not knowing how she became that person. I think there are a lot of people out there who are looking in the mirror right now, asking themselves the same question." Indeed, the incident had sparked conversations everywhere. Corporate diversity trainings were being scheduled at companies across the country. Retail stores were reviewing their customer service policies and staff training programs. Schools were using the video as a starting point for discussions about bias and respect. At Grandview Shopping Center, Mr. Harrison had implemented immediate changes. All staff members were required to undergo sensitivity training. Customer service policies were rewritten to emphasize treating every customer with equal respect, regardless of appearance. New hiring practices were put in place to ensure a more diverse workforce. Jennifer, the sales associate who had first served Maya, had volunteered to speak at local high schools about the importance of not judging people by their appearance. She had been deeply affected by her role in the incident and was determined to help prevent similar situations in the future. Back in her lawyer's office, Victoria was reading through news articles about the ongoing impact of what the media had dubbed the Grandview incident. She saw interviews with civil rights leaders calling it a teachable moment. She read opinion pieces about the persistence of racism in America. She watched video after video of Maya Johnson speaking with quiet dignity about the need for understanding and change. "I want to take the plea deal," Victoria said suddenly, "but I want to add something to it." Morrison looked up from his papers. "What do you mean?" "I want to do more than just community service and anger management," Victoria said. "I want to work with organizations that fight discrimination. I want to learn about the history and experiences I clearly know nothing about. And I want to speak publicly about what I did and why it was wrong." Her lawyer looked surprised. "That's unusual. Most clients in your position want to minimize their public exposure, not increase it." Victoria shook her head. "I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can use what happened to help prevent other people from making the same mistakes I made." The next day, Maya received an unexpected phone call. It was Dr. Williams, the civil rights attorney who had witnessed the incident. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Williams said, "I've been contacted by Victoria Ashworth's attorney. She wants to meet with you. She's proposing something that goes beyond the typical legal resolution." Maya listened as Dr. Williams explained Victoria's proposal. Instead of simply paying damages and completing court-ordered community service, Victoria wanted to work with Maya to create educational programs about bias and discrimination. She wanted to fund scholarships for students from underrepresented communities. She wanted to partner with civil rights organizations to promote understanding and change. "What do you think?" Dr. Williams asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Part of her was skeptical. It was easy to propose grand gestures when facing serious legal consequences. How could she know if Victoria's change of heart was genuine or just another performance designed to minimize the fallout from her actions? But another part of Maya remembered the look in Victoria's eyes during those final moments at the shopping center. The shame and horror when she realized what she had done. The tears when Maya spoke about treating each other with dignity and respect. "I'll meet with her," Maya decided, "but not alone, and not without clear commitments about what she's proposing to do." A week later, Maya and Victoria sat across from each other in a conference room at Dr. Williams's law office. It was their first face-to-face meeting since the incident, and the tension in the room was palpable. Victoria looked different than she had that day at the shopping center. Her expensive clothes and perfectly styled hair were the same, but her demeanor had changed completely. She looked humbled, almost fragile, as if the events of the past 2 weeks had fundamentally altered something inside her. "Mrs. Johnson," Victoria began, her voice barely above a whisper, I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that nothing I can say or do will undo what I did to you. But I want you to know that I haven't slept properly since that day. Not because I'm worried about the consequences to me, but because I keep seeing the look on your face when I—" She paused, unable to complete the sentence. Maya studied Victoria's face, looking for signs of sincerity or manipulation. What she saw was a woman who appeared to be genuinely grappling with the magnitude of what she had done. "What I want to understand," Maya said carefully, "is how someone gets to the point where they think it's acceptable to assault a stranger because they don't like the way that person looks." Victoria took a shaky breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been asking myself that question every day. I think I got so used to privilege that I forgot other people were even real. I lived in this bubble where everyone looked like me and thought like me, and when I encountered someone outside that bubble, I reacted like they were a threat to my world rather than just a human being trying to live their life." The honesty of the response surprised Maya. She had expected defensive excuses or attempts to minimize what had happened. Instead, Victoria seemed to be engaging in genuine self-examination. "The scary thing is," Victoria continued, "I don't think I'm unique. I think there are a lot of people like me who have the same biases and assumptions, but who've just never been in a situation where those attitudes led to something so obviously and publicly wrong." Maya nodded slowly. "So what are you proposing to do about that?" Victoria pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. "I've been working with several organizations over the past week. I want to fund a program that brings diversity and inclusion training to private schools, country clubs, and upscale businesses, places where people like me spend time and where these attitudes often go unchallenged." She flipped through several pages of detailed proposals. "I also want to establish a scholarship fund for students of color who want to pursue business or LA." 2 years later, Maya Johnson stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom in downtown Chicago, looking out at an audience of over 1,000 people. The annual Conference on Social Justice and Inclusion had become one of the most important gatherings of its kind, and Maya had been asked to give the keynote address. The transformation in her life since that day at Grandview Shopping Center had been remarkable. She had written a best-selling book called Grace in the Face of Hate, which explored not just her own experience, but the broader issues of discrimination and healing in America. The book had been translated into 12 languages and was being used in college courses across the country. More importantly to Maya, the Johnson Foundation for Social Justice had awarded over $2 million in scholarships to deserving students from underrepresented communities. The foundation's diversity training programs had been implemented in hundreds of businesses, schools, and organizations. Their work was making a real difference in real people's lives. 2 years ago, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the large ballroom. "I walked into a jewelry store to buy a birthday gift for my sister. I walked out having learned something profound about both the worst and best aspects of human nature." In the audience, Victoria Ashworth sat in the front row, listening intently. She looked different now than she had during her privileged days as a real estate developer's wife. Her clothes were still nice, but less ostentatious. Her hair was simpler. Most notably, her expression had changed. Gone was the entitled arrogance, replaced by something that looked like humility and genuine engagement with the world around her. Victoria had kept every promise she made during that meeting in Dr. Williams' office. She had pled guilty to assault charges and completed her community service working with homeless populations and civil rights organizations. She had undergone intensive counseling and education about racial bias and social justice. Most difficult of all, she had spoken publicly dozens of times about her actions and the thinking that led to them. The speaking engagements had been painful but necessary. Standing in front of corporate executives, students, community groups, and others, Victoria had forced herself to relive that day at the shopping center over and over again. She had analyzed her thought processes, explained how privilege and bias had blinded her to Maya's humanity, and challenged her audiences to examine their own assumptions and behaviors. "I was the person who made assumptions about Mrs. Johnson based on nothing more than her appearance," Victoria had said in these speeches. "I was the person who thought my wealth and social status gave me the right to treat another human being with disrespect and violence. If you think you're not capable of such behavior, I urge you to look more closely at your own biases. because I thought I was a good person too. The partnership between Maya and Victoria had been controversial at first. Many people felt that Victoria was getting off too easily, that allowing her to participate in anti-discrimination efforts was like rewarding bad behavior. Others criticized Maya for showing too much forgiveness to someone who had committed what was clearly a hate crime. But the results spoke for themselves. The programs they had developed together were reaching people in ways that traditional diversity training often failed to do. Victoria's willingness to serve as a cautionary tale, to stand up and say I was wrong, and here's how I got that way, was creating powerful, teachable moments. Real change, Maya continued from the podium, doesn't happen through punishment alone. It happens when we're willing to have difficult conversations, when we're willing to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our society, and when we're willing to do the hard work of building understanding across divides that seem impossible to bridge. In the audience, Victoria wiped away a tear. The journey from that terrible day 2 years ago to this moment had been the most challenging period of her life, but also the most meaningful. She had lost most of her old friends and social connections, but she had gained something more valuable, a sense of purpose and an understanding of what it meant to be part of something larger than herself. The legal consequences had been significant but manageable. The civil lawsuit had been settled for a substantial sum that went entirely to the Johnson Foundation. Victoria had paid additional damages and legal fees. Her husband Richard's business had suffered initially, but had eventually recovered as he demonstrated his own commitment to diversity and inclusion in his company's practices. More challenging than the financial cost had been the social cost. Victoria had been forced to confront the fact that many of her relationships had been superficial, based more on status and wealth than genuine connection. The friends who disappeared when her story went viral had shown her that she had been living in a bubble of privilege that insulated her from real human connection, but she had also discovered something she hadn't expected, the deep satisfaction that came from meaningful work. Her efforts with the diversity programs, her scholarship fund, and her speaking engagements had given her life a purpose it had never had before. For the first time, she felt like she was contributing something valuable to the world rather than simply consuming its benefits. I want to share something with you, Maya continued from the podium. The woman who assaulted me that day is here in this audience tonight. Victoria Ashworth and I have worked together for the past 2 years to create programs that address the kind of thinking that led to that incident. Some people have criticized this partnership, have said that I was too forgiving, too willing to work with someone who had caused me harm. The audience stirred with interest. Many knew about the partnership between Maya and Victoria, but seeing them in the same room still created a sense of tension and curiosity. But here's what I've learned, Maya said. Hatred and prejudice thrive in isolation. They grow stronger when we refuse to engage with people whose views differ from our own. Change happens when we're willing to see the humanity in everyone, even those who have failed to see our own humanity. Victoria felt her heart racing as she realized Maya was about to ask her to speak. They had discussed this possibility, but Victoria had hoped it wouldn't happen. Speaking about her actions was never easy, but doing so in front of such a large and important audience felt overwhelming. Victoria, Maya said, looking directly at her, would you please join me up here? The ballroom fell completely silent as Victoria made her way to the stage. The walk felt endless, with over 1,000 pairs of eyes watching her every step. When she reached the podium, Maya embraced her briefly, a gesture that spoke volumes about the journey they had taken together. 2 years ago, Victoria said, her voice shaking slightly, I committed one of the most shameful acts of my life. I let my prejudices and sense of entitlement lead me to assault an innocent woman who was simply trying to shop for a birthday gift. I want to tell you about that day, not to make excuses for what I did, but to help you understand how seemingly good people can do terrible things when they stop seeing others as fully human. For the next 20 minutes, Victoria walked the audience through her story. She talked about her privileged upbringing, her isolated social circle, the gradual accumulation of biases that went unchallenged for years. She described her thinking on that day at the shopping center, the assumptions she made about Maya, the rage that led to violence. But she also talked about what had happened since. The shock of realizing who Maya was married to, yes, but more importantly, the shock of realizing that it shouldn't have mattered. the slow, painful process of examining her own beliefs and behaviors, the education she had pursued to understand the history and ongoing reality of discrimination in America. The hardest thing to accept, Victoria said, was that I had become someone I wouldn't have recognized when I was younger. Somewhere along the way I had lost my empathy, my basic sense of human decency. I had become the kind of person my own parents would have been ashamed of. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Victoria's vulnerability and honesty were creating a powerful moment of connection and understanding. I can't undo what I did, Victoria continued. I can't take back the pain I caused Mrs. Johnson, or the example I set for everyone who witnessed my behavior. But I can try to ensure that my mistakes serve a purpose. I can try to prevent other people from making the same choices I made. When Victoria finished speaking, the applause was long and heartfelt. Many people in the audience were crying, moved by the raw honesty of her account and the transformation it represented. Maya returned to the podium for her closing remarks. This is what real change looks like, she said. Not perfect people doing perfect things, but flawed human beings willing to do the hard work of becoming better. Victoria and I will never be friends in the traditional sense. Too much has happened for that. But we have become partners in the work of building a more just and understanding world. As the conference ended, and people began to file out of the ballroom, Maya and Victoria stood together on the stage watching the crowd. 2 years ago, they had been strangers whose brief, violent encounter had exposed some of the worst aspects of American society. Tonight, they were partners whose ongoing work was helping to address those same problems. Do you ever regret it? Maya asked.